I actually think that he, in terms of handling being an NFL quarterback, is the most ready. Certainly, these guys are getting paid a lot, and they're money wise, they're more prepared than they've ever been. But in terms of spotlight and expectations, nothing that he will face in the NFL is going to be more than what he's faced so far.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option. I am your host, Yogi Roth. It's our NFL Combine edition. Really excited about today's guest, Roddy Jones. He was an elite athlete growing up in Atlanta, multiple sports, drafted in Major League Baseball, played college football at Georgia Tech, and now is on this remarkable path in broadcasting. He works for ESPN. You might know his face from calling the college football playoff game, SMU and Penn State. If you're a Colorado fan, which I think a lot of Colorado fans might lock into this episode, you know him because he called 4 of your games this season. He also hosts a show every single day on SiriusXM radio. Got to know him over the course of the last year. Of course, have tracked his path over the course of the last handful of years. And Roddy's humility just continues to shine through. So we wanted to bring him on for today's conversation. As always, every conversation is presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. So Roddy Jones and I will dive into Shedeur Sanders, what it's like to go into a Colorado production meeting, and even part of his path and how he looks at the craft of broadcasting. A fascinating man, a really talented broadcaster, a guy that is just rising through the ranks, and really grateful for his time today. So let's get right to it. Roddy Jones, presented by our founding partner, 76. And as mentioned, Roddy Jones, ESPN, SiriusXM, a guy I got a chance to talk to every single Tuesday, all season long. Now we get you on Y Option, man. Good morning. How are you living as the Combine is about to get going here in the NFL?
Man, I'm great. It's a pleasure to be on here with you. Thank you for being on with us every week. I know what time commitment that is, and football season is a hectic time for you as well. So, Ben and I really appreciate it. It's always great to chat, man. Like, your insights are something that I looked forward to hearing every week. And I seek out in the off season. So it's great to chat with you.
Yeah, back at you, man. It's been fun. As broadcasters, we track the voices we hear on television, right, on every Saturday. Yeah. And I had heard yours, of course, for many years. And then this year, it seemed, at least from us on the West Coast, like you got this really cool elevated stage. And it was blast. I want to get into that, especially around the CFP game that you called with SMU and Penn State. But I want to go back in time because a lot of parents and athletes listen to this show. And you played multiple sports so well that you were drafted out of high school into Major League Baseball. I'm curious for you, when you look back on that, how did you think that has impacted you as an athlete and now as a professional with all the things that you're doing at XM, at SiriusXM and ESPN?
Well, I think as an athlete, like it just made me saying it made me more well-rounded is probably not doing it justice, because it really flexed muscles that you didn't just have in one sport. Like, football is a sport that's about aggression, and you solve your problems through trying harder and gritting more and just grinding more and putting your head down and saying, all right, I'm going to get this 2 yards by any means necessary. Baseball's not like that. Like, if you're having an 0 for 4 game and you come up in the last inning with runners on base, your team's counting on you. You don't get a hit by trying harder. You don't get the hit by grasping the bat tighter. And so I think that sort of those crucial moments, the ability to flush mistakes, you have to do it in football. But if you're not a quarterback, like, honestly, as a running back, you can linger on mistakes a little bit. You can just say, all right, I'm upset, and then on the next play, I'm just going to go hit somebody really hard. And usually it's not going to cost your team the game. You do that as a quarterback, and you can change everything. But I played running back and some defensive back in high school. So I think from a mentality standpoint, it really helped me. Be able to sort of flush the bad moments, move on. And then from a skills standpoint, I played outfield, tracking the baseball, having the ability to throw the ball, all of those things, hand-eye coordination, all of those things, I think, helped me as an athlete and helped me, because I wasn't the biggest, the fastest, or the strongest. And so playing college football wasn't always a guarantee. And so I think those skills certainly helped me. And then professionally, like, you just have so much on your plate when you're playing 2 sports. one sport's a lot to manage, but when you have to sort of switch mindsets and you have to, have two different sets of stuff even that you have to keep track of, stuff like that, I think has really helped me in the professional world, because as I've gotten in and been asked to do more, and at one point I was working two jobs. I was working a 9 to 5 and doing broadcasting. Like, it never felt like too much to me, because in college there were days where I would have weights in the morning, class after that, then you'd have lunch and study hall, and then you'd go to like a baseball game in the summertime. And then you'd rinse and repeat and do it all over again at 6 a.m. And then I had an internship on top of that. So there's an internship in there. So those days were packed. And so anything I do now, like I say, it's not working for a living. It's because I've gone through stuff that's physically and mentally hard. And so now it feels like fun all the time.
Yeah, you've got a steadiness to you, I believe, on air. Like when I watch analysts, I'm always like just trying to learn, trying to steal something from you. How does he approach this part of the game? And I feel like there's a steadiness to you. And I wonder if you agree with that. And if so, like, do you think it's from baseball? Like, do you think there's like, all right, 0 for 4, but you got to come back up and it's this moment, next pitch, next at bat?
I do, and mentally I try and stay in a place where we're thinking about the next play. And honestly, I appreciate you saying that, because there's a lot of times as analysts we can get hyped with the environment. And as you said at the beginning, I was doing bigger games this year with bigger environments, in places that are really charged up. And so going into games at the beginning, you're feeling that emotion, but you want to be the same guy in the fourth quarter that you are in the first. And so sometimes it means sort of tamping down those emotions that you feel at the beginning and just delivering. And then once you settle into the second and third quarter, it feels the same. And there's an obvious natural crescendo in the fourth when you've got a great game. So I do think it's from baseball. I do think it's from, hey, I may have said a yardage wrong or a number wrong. Well, flush it. Next one. Nobody cares. Let's go to the next pitch. Let's go to the next play. So I definitely think that baseball mentality helped me, because it is something that I really struggled with in baseball. That was probably my biggest struggle. One strikeout was going to lead to another, was going to lead to an error, was going to lead to a bad at bat, especially early in my career. And then, as you get older, you get more mature, you just sort of learn to handle that. And I don't think I ever handled it well in baseball, but I got better.
I love it. All right, I want to nerd out on the broadcasting front for a minute, and we'll get to some real football stuff in a second. Probably 12, 13 years ago, I'm driving in LA, and I hear our friend Colin Cowherd on the radio.
Yeah.
And he said a line to me, I'm going to repeat to you, that gave me like, oh my God, like just a very awkward feeling. The line was something of the following of, college football analysts have the hardest job in television, because you've got to say 250 smart things in 15 seconds or less in a 3.5 hour window. And I thought, oh my God, how can and I'd been doing it for about 5 years at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, full anxiety. Like, how do you ever do that? Right. And then you settle into it and you do another season, you never really think about that in the game. But I think when you zoom out, you're like, whoa, that craft is a craft, right? That is not just going up and knocking out a podcast. Like, you make this look easy. It's not easy, but it's probably way easier than doing a broadcast, like doing a college football game. To that point, how do you approach your craft? Like, as a fellow analyst, I'm curious, like, how you approach your week, how you navigate what a game is like what your lens is as you walk into a booth every Saturday.
I think it's a constant evolution, and I am always learning from guys I hear on air, and I am always asking questions like this to people. So I'd love to hear yours after this as well. I think the way the week is structured, to me, like a lot of it, because we do radio, because you do the podcast, like because you're on with us, and because you want to recap, a lot of early in the week, Sunday, Monday, is looking back. What happened over the weekend, a little bit of looking forward, and it gets easier the later in the season, to be honest, because you've been looking back at so many of these teams that you see all the time. And then once, sort of Monday after our Monday show hits, that's when I start looking forward to our game. And it really starts with, the first thing I do is pop on the last game. You just turn it on, you watch it. You don't really know. Sometimes, especially early in the season with the transfer portal, you don't really know a lot about how these teams look, week 1, week 2. And so you're just kind of getting a feel for the teams. And then around, Tuesday, Wednesday-ish, you start to dig into the players and their backgrounds, because that's when I get my boards. And so that's when I sit down with my boards, start to look at the players. That's around the time we'll have visitors, coaches meetings. So, you'll have, I don't know, 50% of the visiting team done. You get the coaches meetings done. Then you go back and you sort of check. All right, I learned this. I didn't really see that on film. Let me go back and check why they, do this on third downs or whatever. Um, so a lot of Tuesday leading up to the visiting coaches calls is a visiting team with a little bit of familiarity with the home team. After visiting coaches, you're diving into the home team full go, because by Friday, by the time you meet with the home coaches, I mean, you're like 90% for both teams, and this is just the cherry on top. Which is why, in an ideal world, you would meet with both teams on Friday and you would meet with them in person. A lot of that depends on your travel and your cruise travel, but and then going into the games, I kind of use Friday as situational stuff. Did I miss anything on third downs? Did I miss anything in the red zone? Did I miss anything? Any special situations? Did I miss a special teams play? Because sometimes you're watching so much offense defense. Sometimes I forget, like, oh man, I got to watch the special teams film with the cut ups that we have. So did I miss anything special teams wise? And then by Saturday, hopefully everything's in the bar. And sometimes I leave some stuff. We have a late game, especially like we had Colorado at 10:15 Eastern a couple of times. I'll go crazy just sitting in the room, and I can't stay in the hotel gym all day. I can't hike all day, so I'll leave some stuff to do, just like writing some third down stuff or situational stuff. Big throws like he taught me, which I started to track. I'll write some of that stuff on my board, and then when you get to the game, man, like so much of what we do prepping going into it, you don't even look at during the game because it's sort of in your head, and then there's so much filtering that goes on. What's important at the time? Our producer, Kim Belton, says scratch where it itches. So, I may have this great nugget that I've thought was going to be a big factor in the game all week long. And then it just turns out it's not. Maybe, a red zone defense, Notre Dame was great in the red zone all year long. If they had a game where, the team doesn't get in the red zone, well, that nugget's gone. And then if the, Penn State gets in the red zone one time, they score. Okay, it's worth a mention, but it's probably not worth harping on and having the 3 graphics that we had built on it. So I think so much of it is just, it's really filtering everything that you have over the course of the week, everything that you dive into, what's important, what's not, and then just moving on and being okay with that. And a lot of the environment, I think, speaks for itself. So learning when not to talk, I think it's a big thing too.
Ready, set. Use French fries to go. Yeah, oil from French fries. Turn yesterday's leftovers into today's fuel. More power, lower emissions. 76 renewable diesel fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
Did you feel a different pressure calling a playoff game than calling a Colorado game at 10:15 Eastern?
Heck yeah, absolutely. Dude, even in the Colorado games. So just to give people a little bit of the background, I got moved when the RG3 news came out, which was basically a week and a half before the first game that crew was supposed to have. It was the Colorado North Dakota State game. And so being out there in that environment was charged up. It was probably the most charged environment I'd ever been in. And then, fast forward to the end, and the college football playoff game did feel different. And we knew we were going to have one. And then you learn that it's Penn State, and it's like, okay, you know what it means. You feel the gravity of it, but you try and approach it like you do every other week. Because of the run up, we had more time. We had 2.5 weeks, I think, after we found out before the game. So there was more prep that went into it just because there was more time, but you try and not make too much of it. And then, again, early in the game when that place is charged up and there's 106,000 and it's a wide out, like, dude, I wanted to jump out of the press box and go play. But ultimately it's the same game. And, you try and rely on the fact that the people who make the decisions on who's going to be in those seats liked what you were doing before you got in that seat. So just do what you do, and let the chips fall where they may, man.
I love it. You were marvelous. I'll save my deeper dive broadcast questions for a text thread or a phone call after the show, because I want to get to some specific things, and I'll answer your question too, man. But I'll say this for you, what I'm curious about. I called Colorado games with Coach Prime, with Deion Sanders as the head coach. And it's an interesting beast, even going into the production meeting. Here we sit at the NFL Combine week, and it hits me as we're talking, you're a dual sport athlete. Clearly, Deion was like one of the greatest, not the greatest. He or Bo, have the debate if you want, who is the best 2-sport athlete. I'm curious for you of how, what your lens is on Colorado football, and then specifically to Shedeur Sanders. He's not going to throw at the combine. He's going to talk. We've seen that many, many times with the top, perceived quarterbacks in the NFL draft. A lot of them haven't thrown in years past. Caleb Williams last year, it comes to mind. What was your thoughts on walking into production meeting, that experience? And then what are your thoughts on Shedeur Sanders heading into this NFL draft and this combine experience this week?
The production meetings are pretty surreal, especially when you get to the Coach Prime part of it. I mean, there's a lot of people around that program, and there's always a lot of people around him, so it does feel different. And that was something that you kind of have to check. I'm born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. Like, Deion Sanders is a legend here because he played for the Braves, he played for the Falcons, and obviously what he meant to the city at the time. And that's sort of when I was coming into my sports consciousness. So you have to sort of say, all right, I've got a job to do. You can't fanboy. We're not going to go into, the high step or any of the stuff that he did during his career. And you just get down to the football questions. But he was very authentic with us. We really appreciated there was a warmth there. He was familiar with a lot of our crew because they had done his games at Jackson State and in the Celebration Bowl, and they had done Colorado games a couple times last year. So that we had a leg up, but there was a warmth. I think the thing about Colorado as a program, and this applies to Shedeur too, is there is so much substance behind all the flash of that program and of that player that I think there's so much attention and flash that it's hard to get down to that. But the thing I was struck with was his coordinators are football guys. Pat Shurmur is a football guy, former NFL head coach. Like, he loves ball. He doesn't like the production meetings. He doesn't like the media stuff. He likes to talk ball, and he likes to coach players. And that was something that, it's not that I didn't expect it, but it really hits you in the face. Robert Livingston, same way. And I think with Shedeur, we had a chance to talk to him once, and I really didn't know what to expect, Yogi. I'm not going to lie, because the exposure that you have to him is through the media that they put out, the interviews, which I don't think he loves doing. And then you just see the fact that he's, courtside at the Aces game with Mark Davis, and you see all the flash. But he was very humble with us. He was very grounded, I thought. And I think the work that he puts in is something that we don't talk enough about. He has as intentional a pregame warm-up as any quarterback that I've seen. And in talking to him about it, every little thing in that pregame warm-up, which they tweak a little bit, he and his quarterback coach tweak it from time to time, it all has a place and it all has a reason. And so I actually think that he, in terms of handling being an NFL quarterback, is the most ready. Certainly, these guys are getting paid a lot, and they're money-wise, they're more prepared than they've ever been. But in terms of spotlight and expectations, nothing that he will face in the NFL is going to be more than what he's faced so far. So I'm really excited to see where he goes. I'm really excited to see who drafts him, what's around him. Because I think in the right system, he's an incredibly quick processor. He's got a great release. He's got great accuracy. His deep ball really improved this year, I thought. So I think he's got a shot. I think he's got a shot to be very good.
Yeah, I think, if we put our NFL front office hat on or sports psychologist hat on, and these rooms. So this is what's going to happen in Indianapolis all week long. And, they're going to get to Saturday and the quarterback's going to throw and he's not going to throw, but he'll have met with the majority of teams and not every team. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to ask like some very poignant questions. And one you might be able to shed some light on is, how does Shedeur Sanders navigate a locker room? Mm-hmm. Because I think he was so different than every one of his peers other than Travis Hunter. Right. And even then, he wasn't Deion Sanders' son. Like it's just been a different deal for him. And I've always said for Deion, we called his games a year ago when they were in the Pac-12. It was the same deal. Like production meetings it was just a force of nature. It was awesome. Like you had to bring it. And I love production meetings. It's like you prep your butt off for production meetings to ask poignant, detailed, football specific questions. Like you got to have your rundown because you don't know if that coach is heading to another meeting, just came from a challenging meeting. Like you never know what they're coming from or going to. But I think for Shedeur Sanders, I think the world sees him and says, okay, yes, balled out everywhere he has gone. To your point, has improved as a player. You can't argue what you see on tape. I remember the first practice I saw him 2 springs ago. I came back and I called Jim Thornby, who's a producer and co-founder of this show. And I said, this is the best passer I've ever seen at Colorado in 17, 18 years. Now, Sefo Lufau, Steven Montez, Cody Hawkins, like it's not like it was riddled with NFL players, But point being, it took one practice to say, this is the best passer. And he hadn't played a snap yet for these guys. So again, I go back to the question I think will be asked of him and of people in his circle is, how were you able to navigate a locker room? Because there is probably a perception of, we see the watch, we see the flair, we see the court side. And I wonder maybe what you have gleaned from, I think you called 4 of their games this season.
Yeah. That is a great question, because I think part of that question is what's baked into part of that question is, how are you going to handle the locker room without the dad being the coach? And he allowed the players a lot of freedom to express themselves. After games, they had people on the sideline who came and put chains on the offensive linemen. Like Jordan Seaton's out there, and after they win, like he's already got a chain on, and I see a guy putting it on him. Like, that's different. But I also feel like, because he is Coach Prime's son, I feel like there were a little bit different rules for Shedeur and Travis and Shiloh. In different ways. Like, Travis's rules were different because he was playing both ways, and Coach Prime kind of setting the tone to be okay with that. Shedeur, I think everyone knew Shedeur was going to put in the work, and so I'm not saying it's daddy ball. I'm not at all accusing Colorado of that, because I don't think it was. I think Pat Shurmur coached Shedeur hard, but I do think the fact that your dad is the head coach just naturally leads to you having a little bit different set of rules than everyone else. I think it's natural. And so I do wonder, how do you relate to a locker room when your dad isn't the figurehead? Your dad isn't the person that makes all the decisions. And when you have guys that he will be walking into a locker room for the first time with guys that have more money than him. How does that play out? He will be walking into a locker room with guys that are drastically more accomplished, because when he got to Jackson State, he was the best quarterback in the SWAC as soon as he walked in. When he got to the Pac-12, it was a hungry team. It was a bunch of guys that were all grinding towards the same thing. You're going to get to the NFL, there's going to be established players who know more than you, who are more accomplished, who have more. I think it's a question with any quarterback draft in the first round. I think he will go in with the humility. And again, it's an NFL coaching staff that they have. A lot of guys have spent time in the league. His dad obviously played in the league forever. He's been around NFL players for his whole life. I don't think it will be a shock. And I think they will let him know what to prepare for. What are the things you're going to have to look for? I'm sure he talks to guys in the league now because of friendships or connections or whatever. So I think he'll be prepared for it, but it's different when you get there. So it's a great question. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's going to be just fine. I think it's really easy to point out the things that maybe the historians in football don't like, right?
Yeah.
Like old school approach. But I think the best teams in college or the NFL create an environment where your only job is to be the purest, best version of you within the foundation and the boundaries of the franchise.
Yep.
And I think if he could walk into a culture like that, he'll be just fine. He'll be just fine. And I think some of the scouts or the people that meet with him are just going to have to get past the idea that, hey, college athletes are now brands. Usually it was like, until you became a Super Bowl winner, you started doing the things that Shedeur Sanders has done since he arrived at Colorado. But it's a different landscape. So I'm so curious to see what the perception is, because I think it'll be a thing, right? Like, there's not a lot of storylines in this year's NFL draft, like there was at least last year at the quarterback position. But one thing that is interesting about the NFL draft, you called games at Miami and Cam Ward. You did Jaxson Dart and Shedeur. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here on this one. Like, when you look at those three, they seem to be the conversation. I throw Dillon Gabriel in there as well. He won't get drafted as high as either Cam or Shedeur, I'd imagine. But where do you think you net out? Like, if you were to pick a guy, having seen 3 of those 4 in person, I know you've watched a ton of Dillon as well. Mm-hmm. Where would your head go if you were running a franchise now?
Yeah. So first off, I love Dillon Gabriel. We had him last year when he was at Oklahoma in their first game, where he, all the talk was like, well, Jackson Arnold, this hot freshman. He goes out and throws 6 touchdowns and absolutely literally makes Butch Jones cry as they played Arkansas State. And so, and obviously I had Dillon Gabriel at UCF. Like, I've seen his whole career. Love the kid. And I think if he gets in the right system, he will be an excellent addition to a football team. Will he ever be a top-end starter in the NFL? I don't know. I certainly wouldn't count against him because I think that much of just the player and the person. In terms of those 3 guys, I think I net out. I would go with Shedeur first. I think there is a quickness of processing and an accuracy that you can build around very quickly. There's enough mobility there. I think there's still a lot of room for him to grow literally and physically. Physically, I think he's still got a bit of an underdeveloped upper body. Like, I think from a chest and arm standpoint, like he can still get a little bit big. You don't want your quarterbacks bulky, but I think he can get a little bit bigger, put on some more weight. I think from a toughness standpoint, top quarterbacks go to bad teams. They get sacked a ton. That dude got sacked more than anybody in the world over the last 2 years. And was there some friction at times on the sideline with the offensive line? Yeah, sure there was. But I think the toughness, that guy kept getting up over and over and over. Go back and look at the bowl game against BYU. Like, BYU got after him, and he comes back in the second half and plays well. And so I think there's a resilience there that he has. Cam Ward certainly has it too. Jaxson Dart, I think there's a toughness there too. But I think I net out with Shedeur. But I really like the calmness and the leadership of both Jaxson Dart and Cam Ward, especially Cam, when you look at how he won over that locker room, how quickly he did it, the way he had to carry that team at times. I think that you want that out of a quarterback that's going to the NFL. And then Jaxson Dart, I know there's some people that are a little bit down on some parts of his game. Again, from a toughness standpoint, from an ability standpoint, I think it's all there. And so none of these guys are perfect, although even the guys that we think are perfect can struggle. But I think I would net out with Shedeur just because of the accuracy and all the way he's been prepared really his whole life for this thing.
Yeah, I think I would too. And I think I'd take Sam Darnold over all of them. So like, what will happen? Who knows?
How about that resurgence, man? Like, so much of I spent a lot of time talking to EJ Manuel, and so he has sort of changed a lot of my perception about what happens with these quarterbacks behind closed doors because of his own experience that he's talked to me about, and just some of the things to look at. We'll be talking about a guy and he'll say, well, yeah, but look at not just the offensive coordinator, look at the room around him. That guy had a veteran backup that wasn't threatened, that wanted to help him along, or that guy didn't have anybody in that room with him. You look at what Bryce Young did this year. Like, he had Andy Dalton, and Andy Dalton probably helped him so much from an off the field standpoint, how to prepare. And so the resurgence of a Sam Darnold because of the system and because of the culture of a program, the resurgence of a Jared Goff. I love those stories, man. I do, because we jump on these guys. They're just people, and they're trying their hardest. And so right. I love it, man. I love it.
Yeah, it's the most detailed position in the world.
It is.
At least in team sports, and it's such a challenging one. As is being a broadcast, you're going to start calling UFL games. Real quick before I let you go, what changes broadcasting college football, CFP games, and UFL games?
It's a great question that I'm going to be learning on the fly. It'll be my first time. There's a lot more microphones, so there's a lot more laying out, to be honest, is what I've been told in reaction to what people are saying. Offensive coordinators mic'd up, defensive coordinators mic'd up on both teams, head coaches mic'd up, and then a couple players. So there's just a lot of access. And so I think a lot of it is going to be shutting up, letting them talk, reacting off of it. And so in that way, I think it's going to be a little bit more like my sideline days, because I did 4 years on the sideline as a field analyst, sometimes more reporter than analyst, but you're jumping in and you're throwing darts. And when you have those things that you're reacting to, you're jumping in, you're throwing darts, you're getting out, and you're letting the play go. So I'm looking forward to it, though. It'll be fun.
It'll be fun. We'll be watching. Thank you for the time, man. You've always been so gracious. Your humility jumps through the screen on television or in this show here at Y Option and on air at SiriusXM. Thanks, brother. Have a great show today. Enjoy all the combine stuff this week, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
I absolutely will. Thank you for having me, man. I could have done this for a full hour, but I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, I'll call you. I'll do all the production stuff on the side. On another call. There it is. Roddy Jones. Thanks, bro. It's the Afterglow. Yogi Roth, joined by Jim Thornby. That was Roddy Jones. As always, every conversation is presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. Jim, I have a feeling that some people in NFL circles are going to be listening to this conversation as they are going on their way to Indy all week long as the quarterbacks throw on Saturday this weekend. What did you think about Roddy Jones as we dove into Shedeur Sanders and his path in broadcasting?
I mean, it was so cool. And I told him this like right when he got on the interview, like being in the quote unquote Pac-12 bubble the last decade plus, like you hear the same voices on the games over and over again. So this year, getting to hear a lot more of Roddy, coincidentally with him doing Colorado games, but also, not necessarily always being focused on the Pac-12 game. And just super insightful, man. Like I was really impressed with him. And the one thing that really kind of resonated with me, just from, him growing up in Georgia and being that Braves fan, Falcons fan, and then, having these moments with Deion and having to like have that. So like with my dad being in the military, we moved around all over the place. And when I was in first and second grade, we lived in Georgia. So that was a very impressionable time. I grew up a Braves fan because of that time. And like, I can remember, Deion as a Brave, and like it was my favorite thing in sports was to see Deion hit one in the gap, because as he would round first base and you could see it just clicking, and I'm like, I'm getting a third. Like that was baseball is not always the most exciting sport in the world, but when Deion had when that thing just kicked for Deion and you would see him around the bases, like there was nothing better than that. And even like one of the first college football games I can ever remember watching was Florida State and Clemson when Deion was there. When they had the infamous Fumblerooski thing where they the fake play for T-Buck and he ran it all down. But I remember like obviously that play, but also being like, who is this Deion Sanders guy? Then fast forward, 30 plus whatever years later, and like we're in coaches meetings with him for the Pac-12. So it was funny because I at least had friends that had worked with him at NFL Network. So I had never met him before, but at least had like some common bonds with that. And, to the point of him talking about Deion's warmth, like I could feel that too. Like even just like, if you treated Deion like a regular person, he would treat you like a regular person. And so like, I thought that was really cool. So I really appreciated Roddy telling that story as a born and raised, Atlanta native, to, how he handled dealing with all that stuff.
Yeah, it was well said. Right as he begins to talk, I'm thinking, whoa, this is going to be kind of cool, because he grew up watching Deion, to your point, Jim, and the lore of it, and then lived out a version of that, playing multiple sports at obviously a premium level and just being extremely talented. I think one thing I want to follow up that he said was the Deion factor, right? I referenced in our conversation, like there's a gravitas when you walk into the production meetings. I think there's also the other side of that, of the reality that he's a football coach. I think we see all the other things. I've said this for a couple of years now, of like, Deion is a cultural icon. Yeah. Name another coach that's a cultural icon. I've never heard of it. Like, can you think of one?
No, to exactly your point. Like, there's no other coach I can't think of ever that walks in first day and everyone just calls him by his first. Everyone is Deion. Like, yeah. I think that's almost why he had to create the quote unquote Coach Prime persona to like almost like get around that.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, I just think that to that point, he's a 1%er.
Yeah.
As is his son, and Roddy referenced that, of like, when you're the son of Deion Sanders, you just grew up differently. But the same principles allow you to have success on the football field, regardless of who your parents are, where you came from, how you grew up. You have to have a sense of grit to you. He's fallen down how many times and gotten picked back up. As a quarterback, you have to be extremely competitive. He is that. You have to be dramatically accurate. You have to be able to anticipate. You have to be a seeker. All of these things that I think are a part of him. I think what will be interesting is how he navigates now a world where he can't set the rules, right? Like, you can't control your narrative like Colorado did. And I respect what they did, because I think it put their players in a great light. Travis Hunter won the Heisman, for crying out loud. I mean, it was different, but you can't argue the success. And I think that's going to be a really fascinating part of hearing about his interviews. And who knows what is true coming out of those things, the gamesmanship that's coming out of those things. But I don't think for a second that he won't be able to navigate a locker room in the NFL. I also don't think for a second that he's going to walk in and be Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or any of these guys. He's got to just be him. And I think he needs to make sure he goes to a place with a quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, head coach, like all in alignment, where they're going to help him be the most authentic version of him. Because I think when pro athletes or college athletes that are given money like pros or making more than pros. And there's a world where sometimes, and I've seen this, I've talked to guys about it, where your identity can be a little gray. You're trying to figure out who you are because everybody's telling you who you are and what you're about. So I think that is going to be the part that will determine early success for Shedeur Sanders. Capable dramatically. Will it happen? Well, look at the numbers. It doesn't happen for a lot of people. I'm going to write a whole book about it. How a lot of elite quarterbacks don't pan out. Look at Sam Darnold in our conversation with Roddy. Struggled with Jets, Panthers, a lot of reasons outside of his ability, in my opinion at least. I'll stand on the table of saying why he struggled wasn't just his quarterback acumen. There's a lot of things that were around him: coaching, front office, culture, team, locker room, system, etc. And now look at him. A year with the Niners, crushes it with the Vikings, and now he's going to go make $100 million, which is just awesome for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and to your point about the Colorado, with how Shedeur will adjust to in being in those NFL locker rooms. I know we've mentioned this on a prior show before too, but I'm just as fascinated as how Deion is going to adjust at Colorado without his sons and his quasi son Travis Hunter. Like the one is almost like a son to him. Without them in the locker room, like how does the dynamic around that program with the players change, or does it not change? And does that just kind of continue on with just now different people filling those type of roles? So
yeah,
it's fascinating on both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, something I just thought of that you probably thought of. The advantage for having your son as your quarterback when he's a premier player is that you've seen him in every environment, right? How many times did Coach Prime talk about seeing him in Pop Warner and calling his plays in junior high and high school? Like he knows how he navigates certain situations. They get a transfer in from Liberty, who we spent time with at the Elite 11, Caden Salter. They bring in, of course, Julian Lewis now to be the presumptive guy eventually. But remember, he should be going into his senior year in high school.
Right.
So I just think I think it's just going to be really interesting to watch in spring, and then of course once we get to real football in the fall, of like how Coach Prime and the staff navigate with a player that they know as well as every other staff in the country, because most teams aren't coaching their superstar son at the most important position in all of sports. So there it is, setting the table for the combine. It's going to be fun, Jim. We have 329 players are on their way to Indy over the course of the next couple of days. We just had Dillon Gabriel on. He's on his way there now. Go listen to that if you have missed it. It's a real fun conversation. You need a quarterback primer of what matters most in the NFL. Listen to Mark Sanchez. That episode is one of our most listened to episodes, rightfully so, because Mark absolutely brings it. And then if you want a deep dive on Shedeur Sanders, Colorado, the combine, this is today's conversation with Roddy Jones. Everything can be found at yoption.com. Thank you for reading our most recent newsletter. It was really fun for me to write about that, the lessons learned from my kids as I'm thinking about the combine and the self-talk that players have throughout their experience testing, talking, exposing themselves to the media, etc. So a lot of good stuff. We've been cranking. It's the offseason, Jim. I am refreshed, ready to roll. So here we go. Spring ball, I think for some teams, is starting in like a week. So hit refresh on Google or use whatever form of AI to tell yourself what's going on, because it is all going on. Thank you again, of course, to 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. And here we go. Combine. Get glued to it. Rhett Lewis, DJ and company, NFL Network, just on. It's just on for the next 6 days, man. There it is. I'm out. Talk to you soon. Peace.